Hello and welcome to my final league match from the B Division against ZomZraft. This is the feature game because this is the only game in which Rising Sun cards appear. We have two Rising Sun cards here, the first of which is Samurai. Samurai forces each other player down to 3 cards in hand and then gives you +1 coin for the rest of the game after that. Samurai is one of the worst cards from Rising Sun. It is relevant in very few kingdoms. Often there are 5-cost cards that are much more important than the 6-cost Samurai. On the other hand, Rice is a much better card. Rice is a 7-cost treasure that comes with a plus buy and is worth as much coin as the amount of uniques you have in play. In this kingdom, Rice can be worth up to 5 coin. We have actions, we have attacks, durations, wizards, and a liaison. In other words, Rice is a cheaper platinum that comes with a plus buy if you build your deck well. That is well worth the 7 coin. Let's have a look at the rest of the kingdom. We have draw from Torturer, we have plus action from Bandit Camp. We have some limited gain from Treasure Trove and from Conjurer. We have plus buy from only from Rice. And we have trashing only from Student. This looks like a game of 2 or 3 parts, or what I mean is there are 2 or 3 focal points. The first focal point is going to be establishing your Torturer train while getting the deck thin with Student. After that, you want to focus on getting as many Rice cards as possible. Then you can use your plus buy to score via Conquest or Provinces. The end game is probably the third part. How do you leverage your plus buy from Rice now? Let's see how we build the first part of this deck, the Torturer chain. My opponent starts with a Student. Student is excellent. Not only is it the only source of trashing, it is the only source of favors. Why are favors important? Favors allows you to execute the Desert Guides. That is a superb defense against Torturers. You can discard your entire hand, call the Desert Guides, and then you get 5 more cards back. It's as though the Torturer never passed through. My opponent opens with a Student. I'll do the same, but I have 4 here, and I will start with the Fortune Hunter. We are a little bit strained on actions, given that there's only 1 pile of villages. I still went for the Fortune Hunter because in the early game, that is often worth as much as a gold. I get 3 coin from that effectively. It is easier for me to hit 5. The 5-cost cards here are very important. Bandit Camp, only source of plus action. Torturer, that is our focal point in the early game here. My opponent agrees with me and they also open with a Fortune Hunter. Identical opens. Let's see how the first shuffle plays out. My opponent sees their Student immediately. They opt to trash a copper here, and on 3 coin they get a dungeon. I do not have the Student, instead I have the Fortune Hunter. As expected, it nets me a copper from the top of the deck, and I get up to 6. There's no way Samurai is right here. It has to be one of the 5s. It is a Bandit Camp first for me, as opposed to the Torturer. The Torturer may draw my Student dead, may draw my Fortune Hunter dead. I rather have the safer Bandit Camp first. Additionally, Bandit Camp puts spoils into the deck. Student cuts your hand size. It'll help me get to 5 again, is what I'm trying to say. My opponent here probably has their Fortune Hunter. Of course, they top deck the Student because they trashed a treasure last turn. So this time they trash an estate and they pass it back to me. So they do not see their Fortune Hunter, unfortunately. It's at the bottom of the deck. I could use my Desert Guides here. I generally don't like to use desert guides to shuffle all the junk back into the deck. What if I draw an equal or worse hand is my reasoning. Sometimes you have to do it. Here, I didn't think I had to do it, so I decided to just play the student, not buy anything, of course. Trash the estate and pass it back to my opponent. We know that they have their Fortune Hunter. We can reliably guess that they have it. However, they choose to call their desert guides here. Their hand has to be very bad for them to do that. Dungeon comes out. Here's our student. Student trashes an estate. And again, for 2 turns in a row, my opponent has not bought anything. This is a reasonable hand for me here. I will not discard it with the desert guides. I can trash a copper, buy a dungeon. Dungeon is going to be an excellent card, as it usually is. Another student play for my opponent. They trash an estate this time, and their Fortune Hunter reveals a copper. Expectedly, they get to 5. They get to a bandit camp. So far, we seem to be roughly equal here. Bandit camp first. That could have been student first, and then I could have drawn the student again. So if I played student first, trash that copper, it would go back on top of the deck. Then I could play bandit camp, get the student one more time, maybe trash another copper or trash an estate. Instead, I decided to do it a little bit differently. I decided to put the spoils in the deck and then trigger a shuffle with the Fortune Hunter. I figured this was fine to do because I have desert guides favors to play with. So if my hand is garbage, I just throw it away and get a new one. It's very easy to get a few favors here, especially in the early game. The way I did it made it more likely that I hit 5, and I do hit 5. So I'm able to pick up a Torturer now before my opponent. It does come at the cost of trashing a little bit less, but it's a line. It's a reasonable line. I don't think there's anything horribly wrong with it. Fortune Hunter finds a copper for my opponent. Again, they trash. They are not able to hit 5. They are only able to get to 3. They get a second dungeon. So far, I'm feeling good now. They've missed 5 on that turn. I didn't. I got to 5. I was able to get my Torturer, and I find my Torturer right away. I will play it right away. Could force them to discard. Probably forces them to discard. It isn't that painful with the desert guides like I mentioned at the beginning of the game. However, it could still be inconvenient depending on your hand. I get to 5 again because of the massive draw from the Torturer. Spend my spoils, get a second bandit camp. As it stands here, my deck is a little better in the sense that I have more bandit camps and more Torturers than my opponent. It is a little worse in the sense that my opponent has a thinner deck than I do, and they have an extra dungeon for consistency. Alright. They do use their desert guides here to get back a full hand of 5 cards. Play their bandit camp. Here's the second dungeon. Probably will find student and Fortune Hunter, and probably get to 5 this time. They have no estates left in the deck, and the Fortune Hunter is fairly likely to find spoils. They didn't find it, but they had a spoils in hand. So now they get a Torturer. Is that okay? Now we have to behave ourselves. My opponent is attacking here. I call the desert guides there because I knew the last 5 cards contained bandit camp and Torturer. So I do find that. I play my Torturer on my opponent. They discard again here. Bandit camp. And here's one of the mistakes from the game. I choose to trash an estate here with the student instead of trashing a copper to get a favor. I have no option for desert guides on my next turn here. Not good. However, I wanted to hit 5. That's why I trashed the estate. Instead of the copper, I picked up a second Torturer. Out comes my opponent's Torturer now, and well, I have to discard here. I could take the curse, but discarding 2 coppers is much better than taking the curse there. I'm not sure if my opponent could hit 5 here after they discarded. They just play our spoils and buy nothing. They want the spoils out of the deck. I thought they should have kept the spoils in the deck, but the bandit camp will repopulate the spoils anyway, so I don't think it's that big of a deal. Fortune Hunter finds me as spoils, gets me to 5 yet again, and not just 5, gets me to 7, and this time I buy a rice. I have all of the pieces in my deck to make rice worth 5 coin. It's just a matter of getting my deck under control now. I have more bandit camps, more torturers. I have the plus buy before my opponent. The only thing I don't have is the thinness that my opponent has. Here's their bandit camp. I expect now they'll get to 5. It's very likely that they find the torturer and they find the spoils. They'll probably get another bandit camp if I had to guess. Here, this hand is way too good for me to discard. I know I have a bandit camp in the bottom 3 cards. There's very likely with the dungeon that I see a bandit camp. If I discarded 2 there and then play the dungeon, I would have to probably discard some good cards. So I take the curse. It's fine to take the curse. The student can trash it. And await my opponent's decision here. They get up to 7 as well, and they get to rice. So they are keeping up. They just have a 1 less bandit camp and 1 less torturer, but they have the rice now. They have all the pieces to make the rice worth platinum money, just like I do. Dungeon, and this is the first bit of sadness in this game here. The bottom card is a bandit camp. I know that. It's not in my hand. So I drop the torturers. I trash a copper here, not a curse. I trash a copper. I've learned my lesson. I can use the money now from the spoils to buy a second dungeon. Alright, maybe we'll have better luck moving forward. But that was quite a critical miss there. If I found that bandit camp, there was some potential I draw into the rice. I have a good turn where I can get 2 5s, 10 and 2 buys. Seems perfectly reasonable for my deck to do once it finds the rice, which is likely to do if I play both torturers. Now my opponent has quite a significant advantage because of that turn. Their deck is much more consistent and they will generate a heap of money here because of that rice. They're able to find the rice before I do. Torturer draws them their whole deck. Here I have to gain the curse here. I don't have to. I choose to gain the curse. I'm not going to play Desert Guides on this hand. These are my only 2 sources of plus action. If I get rid of this, I'll have to play Torturer's Dead. That's not what I want to do. So it's either I discard Copper Curse or take the curse. I choose to take the curse. 10 and 2 buys for my opponent. They go for a rice. Alternatively, Bandit Camp Torturer is perfectly fine for them there too. However, their deck is quite thin, so the rice makes sense. I understand the rice completely. And they even get a silver because they have the thin deck. They can go ahead and add a silver there for a little bit of extra money buying power on the next turn. This time I am able to chain my torturers. I get 2 of them out here. The shuffle is a little bit awkward. Fortune Hunter does help with that somewhat, and the incoming cards from the dungeon too. I get up to 15. No, that's not 15. That's 18 and 2 buys. Could be a couple of rices, but I'm still not drawing everything, so I buy a 3rd torturer. My opponent discards their hand with the Desert Guides. Again, they'll be very consistent, and in fact, they are a little bit ahead here, I would say. Unless I get lucky and keep drawing like how I just drew. Torturer again, just a single torturer here. This is easier for me to discard. In fact, here I'm going to consider using the Desert Guides. This hand isn't great at all. No bandit camps in it. My opponent gets 11 and 3 buys this time. They have the extra rice. They go, that's more than 11 actually. That's enough for bandit camp, torturer. So they're building out quite nicely. Luckily here I find both my torturers. Probably will find my third torturer too. There we go. Here I choose to trash a copper because I need to replenish my stock of favors for the desert guides. Bit of a tricky decision here of what to discard. I choose to discard the student and play the fortune hunter just to clear the top of the deck off a little bit. Again, I didn't have to do that. Probably better was to trash the copper, to stay ahead on the trashing, or to try to catch up on the trashing, and then also have favors to discard to the desert guides. 18 and 3 buys. I'm still not drawing the deck, I noticed. So we're going to add more torturers, bandit camp and rice along with that. My deck has more power but less consistency. I hope I can keep things together well enough until I'm able to trash down a little bit more. I take another curse here. There's a trick with taking the curse. The student does not stay in play if you trash coppers, which means the rice doesn't see the student, it doesn't see liaison, it doesn't see wizard. Your rice loses a heap of value, loses 2 coins of value if the student is not in play. If the student trashes a curse, stays in play, the rice sees the student, sees a wizard, sees a liaison, and gives you 2 extra coin for it. So there's some value to accepting a curse from the torturer every now and then. As the only consideration is not just what is in your hand, is what I'm saying. Let's see what my opponent gets up to. We both now have achieved that first part of the game where we establish a torturer chain, and we are transitioning into the second part of the game where we try to accumulate as many rice cards as possible. 21 and 3 buys for my opponent. Could be triple rice. They don't have the draw for triple rice. They go for double rice. And if I had to guess, it'll be another torturer here. Yep, there's the torturer. This is a good hand for me. Discard curse and spoils. We keep as much draw cards in the hand as possible. I have a couple bandit camps in the... Sadness number 2. There are 2 bandit camps in the bottom 6 cards. I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it. And the lack of consistency is making me pay here. Now I buy a province. That is making a poor decision in an already difficult situation. Province is bad. I should have continued building with some combination of bandit camp, torture, and rice. I was a bit concerned with the consistency my opponent was showing, and the province here was to try to affect them psychologically into going after provinces with me. We have to resolve the mountain pass. I take the points from the mountain pass too, again, to hopefully exert a little bit of scoreboard pressure on my opponent and see if they make a mistake. Spoilers, they don't make a mistake. They play well. They play well. Let's see how much money they get up to now with the extra 2 rice cards. Again, I gain a curse here. I have the dungeon coming in. I don't want to discard good cards off a 3-card hand, and I'm not going to call desert guides on this hand. 2 bandit camps and a torturer is way too good to give away. So my opponent didn't draw everything, but they have a heap of money still. 24 and 5 buys. They go for more torturer, more bandit camp, and a couple more rices. I think they are able to end the game here if they want. I can't. I don't have the buys to do so. Obviously, they won't end the game because I have a hefty points lead here. But they might score on the next turn is what I'm expecting. Again here, there's a bandit camp in the bottom 5 cards. I know that. So we don't get full value from the deck. Student will trash a curse, stay in play. Yeah, look, another bandit camp and another torturer. Pay off some debt here. Rice is going to be worth the full amount of coin. I apologize. Rice is worth 6 because treasure is also a card that is in play. Rice is worth up to 6 coin here. I just realized that. Here, after paying off the debt, I decided to buy a bandit camp. The reason for the bandit camp is to try to make a 3 pile possible on my next turn. I think I have 5 buys, and if I see everything, I should be able to get enough money to buy 2 torturers, 2 bandit camps, and a rice. The duchy is just a little bit of points insurance. This is the way I'm planning to win the game right now, to try to end the game as quickly as possible here. My opponent could stall. I've been stalling. Sure, my deck is less consistent, but they have rices and torturers. You never know what could happen. It's not 100% consistent on the other side of the table. I'm discarding everything here because I will use my Desert Guide's favor. 2 torturers from my opponent, a 3rd torturer. This is going to hurt a lot. The dungeon comes out. Student keeps trashing. They trash a Fortune Hunter to keep the student in play. Each rice is worth 6 coin, and here's the beautiful thing you could do. Conquest 100 million times to gain 1 billion points. And now the points deficit is way out of reach. Even if you go after provinces, you're not winning this game. Your opponent just put 100 million silver in the deck. They will get to at least 1 province a turn from here. That mega conquest turn was effectively the end of the game. I should have resigned there. I decided to keep on playing just to see if I could draw everything once for the game. No, I can't. I play in the hope of a stall turn here, but unfortunately my opponent does not quite stall. They get enough to empty the piles and win the game. The match was drawn 3-3. However, I placed 5th in the division by just half a point. It does mean I relegate to the C division for the next season. There was a lot of background noise for me this season, and I let it get to me. My play was not exemplary at all. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.